Okay, let's dive right in. There's this fundamental, maybe unsettling question. What happens when the world's wealthiest people just don't need the rest of us anymore?
It's a heavy one, and it's right at the heart of the material we're exploring today.
We're looking at excerpts from Arthur Shakarian's book, The Artificial Intelligence Conspiracy, how the world's elites plan to replace everybody else with intelligent machines.
Yeah, and the title alone tells you it presents a pretty stark vision, grounded in a really provocative premise.
And according to Shakarian, this isn't just speculation. He says it's rooted in an alleged insider account, someone who was at a secret meeting of the super rich.
Right, that plus his own follow-up research into AI, societal trends, that kind of thing.
So our mission today is to really unpack that narrative, exactly as the author presents it in this book. It's a story suggesting automation and AI might lead not just to job changes, but, well, potentially mass obsolescence, maybe even elimination.
And we'll look at the psychological stuff, the tech forces he claims are making this possible, or even likely.
Super important to stress, we're looking at this strictly through Shakarian's lens here. The book itself kind of weaves between suggesting an overt conspiracy and looking at broader trends that maybe powerful people are just, taking advantage of.
Exactly. We're here to understand what he's arguing. So yes, settle in. This involves some pretty challenging ideas about where things might be headed, maybe uncomfortable ones.
Okay, let's start where Shakarian starts. This alleged secret gathering.
Yeah, the one that supposedly kicked off his whole investigation. He describes it as intensely secretive. Location kept under wraps, guest list, just the absolute top-tier, super private, ultra-rich figures.
And the invitations. Destroyed immediately after reading. That detail alone sets a certain tone.
Totally. It sounds like something out of a spy movie. And he adds this bit about one person who was apparently outraged by the plan discussed, wanted to leak it.
But then received threats, allegedly, and backed down. It really paints a picture of high stakes and serious secrecy.
The informant, Shakarian's source, estimated maybe 40, 50 people were there.
Not famous faces, he stresses, but these incredibly private, powerful individuals.
The kind of wealth that buys invisibility, right?
Yeah.
Private jets, multiple hidden estates, maybe not even on the public rich list because they prefer it that way.
Precisely. These are the folks who, according to the story, value being unseen.
So these ultra-elite, normally isolated figures,
Yeah.
what brought them together? What was the common problem?
Well, according to the informant, the host of the meeting framed it as their continued dependence on the masses, even with all their wealth tied up in finance and abstract markets.
They still needed actual people around them.
Exactly. Cooks, PAs, groundskeepers, chauffeurs, teachers for their kids, people physically in their private spaces.
And that proximity was seen as a risk?
A huge security risk, yeah. And Shakarian adds this really dark detail here, something he claims he verified independently later. Apparently, the host of this meeting had tragically lost a son years before, allegedly murdered by a jealous housekeeper.
Whoa, that's heavy.
Yeah, that adds a deeply personal, maybe even paranoid motivation to this whole dependence is a risk idea.
It certainly grounds it in something concrete within the narrative, doesn't it? Makes the proposed solution sound less abstract, maybe.
And the solution was?
Straightforward. Use technology to eliminate the need for these lower-class humans entirely. Automation for gardening, cleaning, self-driving cars for chauffeurs, advanced digital tools to replace most human teachers.
So the ultimate goal was achieving a kind of absolute freedom by removing the need to hire anyone outside their circle.
Pretty much. If machines could do everything, grow food, make clothes, run the estates, then owning the machines meant owning everything. No need for a consumer economy, no need for workers, complete self-sufficiency for the elite.
And the pitch ended with a call to action.
Yeah, the host supposedly asked everyone to pool their massive resources for one final push.
Yeah.
A coordinated investment surge into AI and automation specifically to replace everyone. Well, below them on the ladder.
How did that go down in the room with these titans of wealth?
The informant described this. Awkward pause. People weighing the risks, the implications.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they were in favor.
Enthusiastically.
Some apparently were. Dreaming aloud about creating this man-made paradise, free from the hassle, the taint, as the source put it, of dealing with ordinary people, the plebes.
Grim stuff.
But here's the kicker, according to the informant. The one question nobody in that room asked during the whole discussion.
Let me guess. What happens to the rest of us?
Exactly. What happens to the ordinary people when they're no longer needed? That silence, that omission is what reportedly haunted the informant.
And that's the thread we're pulling on today, isn't it? That unasked question. Shakarian himself, he admits he was skeptical at first.
Oh, yeah, totally. He said it sounded like classic tinfoil hat, like old conspiracy theories about secret societies.
So what changed his mind? Why did he decide to write this book?
Two things, he claims. First, his source gave him one very specific piece of insider info that he was apparently able to verify independently. He promised not to reveal what it was, but said it convinced him the source was credible.
Okay, a verifiable detail. And the second thing?
His own deep dive into artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
That became the bulk of his research.
Right, so hearing this wild story pushed him to really understand the state of AI. He even reached out to someone inside the industry.
Yeah, a Google engineer, apparently a friend of a friend. And surprisingly, this engineer didn't just laugh it off. He supposedly took the question seriously enough to suggest they switch to a secure channel for the conversation.
Interesting. What did the engineer tell him about the field?
Well, one key thing was about the terminology itself. The term AI apparently had kind of gotten a bad rap over the years.
How so?
Too many overhyped predictions in the past, the thinking machines by 1980 kind of thing that didn't pan out. So researchers started preferring terms like machine learning or neural networks.
To sound less like sci-fi and more grounded.
Exactly. To manage expectations and avoid those old associations. The engineer explained the big shift came with the resurgence of artificial neural networks, or ANNs.
Models based on the brain, right?
Loosely inspired by it, yeah. Combined with the huge leaps in computing power we've seen, ANNs led to the deep learning revolution. That changed everything.
How did deep learning change things?
It allowed computers to learn from massive amounts of data, recognizing patterns without needing explicit step-by-step programming for every single possibility. This suddenly made things feasible that were pure sci-fi before.
Like what?
Really accurate face recognition, automated translation that actually works pretty well now, huge advances in robotics, automated stock trading that's faster than any human, and of course, self-driving cars moving from theory to reality.
Okay, so that's the technological backdrop. And Shakarian says there's now this new triumvirate of AI terms we need to understand.
Right. ANI, AGI, and ASI. He argues understanding the difference is absolutely critical to grasping the situation as he sees it.
Let's break them down then. First up, AGI.
AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. This is basically what most people think of when they hear AI, a machine with human-level intelligence across the board.
Like HAL 9000 or data from Star Trek. Something that can think, learn, create, converse like a person.
Pretty much. Capable of any intellectual task a human can do: math, painting, philosophy, you name it. Shakarian notes this is often framed as the ultimate goal of a lot of AI research.
But it raises huge questions, right? Can it feel? Is it conscious? What are the ethics?
Absolutely. Big philosophical questions. Shakarian even connects this modern quest to older ideas, like alchemists trying to create life, this recurring theme of creation without, well, the usual biological process.
So why pursue AGI so intensely, given we have, a proven way to make more humans? Shakarian offers two main reasons from the field itself.
The first one ties directly back to that alleged secret meeting. Create artificial workers to do human jobs, making us potentially redundant.
Okay, that fits the narrative. What's the second reason?
This one's a bit more abstract, maybe unsettling. It's about potential superiority.
Superiority. How so? Computers are faster at math, sure, but...
Exactly. They already beat us cold at chess, checkers, complex calculations. They don't need sleep. They don't get bored. They can process information at speeds we can't even imagine.
So the idea is if you create an AI that can think like a human, an AGI, it would combine that human-like flexibility with the raw power of computation.
That's the theory. It would have our intellectual abilities plus the inherent advantages of being a machine. And there's one area where this potential superiority becomes really crucial, maybe even dangerous, according to the book's expert source.
Which is?
Computer programming. Specifically, an AGI's potential ability to improve its own intelligence.
Ah, the self-improvement loop idea. The AI gets smarter, so it can make itself even smarter, faster, and faster.
Precisely. A recursive loop. An AI better at coding than humans could rewrite its own source code, optimize its algorithms, make itself more efficient, then that better version could do it again even faster.
And the timeline on that could be incredibly fast.
The expert in the book suggests it could be exponential. Within days, maybe even hours or minutes of reaching that critical point of self-improvement, an AI could potentially surpass human intelligence by orders of magnitude.
Becoming something alien, something we couldn't comprehend or control.
That's the fear. an intelligence explosion leading to something beyond AGI.
Which brings us to ASI.
Right, ASI. Artificial superintelligence. Defined simply as any intellect that vastly exceeds the cognitive performance of humans in virtually all domains of interest.
And this is where the really scary apocalyptic scenarios come in.
Yeah, this is the territory explored by thinkers like Nick Bostrom at Oxford. His book Superintelligence talks about things like a hard takeoff, where AI intelligence skyrockets uncontrollably.
He even has that theory about computronium, right? An ASI converting all matter, including us, into computing substrate.
That's one of the more extreme thought experiment type scenarios, yeah, to maximize its own processing power. It sounds wild, but Bostrom's work has become incredibly influential.
It's not just fringe talk anymore, is it? You've got major figures like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking taking the potential ASI threat seriously.
Absolutely. There are entire institutes now, funded by tech billionaires, dedicated to figuring out how we could potentially control or align a future ASI with human values, which seems optimistic, maybe.
Definitely raises an eyebrow. So Shakarian lays all this out, the AGI dream, the ASI nightmare.
Yeah, he details the concepts, the fears, the big names involved, and then he just completely pulls the rug out.
How?
After explaining AGI and the terrifying potential of ASI, he states, based on his research and source, that the idea of AGI being achievable anytime soon, or ASI being a real imminent threat, is, in his words, utter bullshit.
Oh, okay. Utter bullshit. That's blunt. After building up the case for how scary it could be, why dismiss it so strongly?
Because, according to Shakarian's core argument in the book, the real danger, the one that's already here and actively reshaping our world, isn't the hypothetical superbrain of the future. It's the third member of that triumvirate. The boring one. ANI. Artificial Narrow Intelligence.
Yeah, narrow intelligence. Okay, that does sound less exciting.
Exactly. And that, he argues, is the whole point. That's why it's the real threat. ANI isn't about consciousness or general understanding. It's just a program designed to do one specific task very, very well.
Often better than a human can do that one task.
Often, yes. Think of it like a super specialized tool, not a thinking being. Your navigation app is ANI. The algorithm recommending videos is ANI. Credit scoring software is ANI. Spam filters, game opponents, automated trading bots, that's all ANI.
So it's the stuff that's already everywhere that we kind of take for granted?
Precisely. He quotes this saying from programmers, as soon as it works, no one calls it AI anymore. That's ANI. It gets integrated, becomes part of the plumbing, and we stop thinking about it as intelligence.
And we don't notice it gradually taking over specific functions task by task.
We just see it as progress or efficiency. A new app, a better system, an automated process. We don't see the cumulative effect of humans being slowly sidelined in function after function.
And connecting this back to the alleged conspiracy, this quiet, gradual replacement via ANI is exactly what those elites want.
That's Shakarian's synthesis. Yes, it's as it should be from their perspective. Let's try to pull his view together here.
Okay.
He argues you have this powerful elite group wanting to replace the masses with machines specifically, with functional ANI applications for every task they rely on others for.
And they see the rest of us, ordinary people, as a problem.
As inconvenient, messy, potentially dangerous. The majority versus their minority. And maybe, chillingly, they see us as biological ANI already.
Meaning?
Moderately smart, good enough for specific jobs, but our general intelligence, our capacity for wider thought or dissent, is seen as unnecessary baggage, even a threat.
So they don't actually want AGI. They don't want truly intelligent, maybe uncontrollable machine minds.
No, Shakarian argues they have zero interest in creating their own replacements. What they need is a complete toolkit of reliable, narrow AI to automate their world. He even suggests most of them probably don't believe AGI is truly possible anyway, despite funding research towards it.
Okay, if that's the case, then why all the hype? Why the huge focus on AGI, the dramatic ASI threat narratives? How does that fit Shakarian's picture?
He calls it a smokescreen, a very effective multi-layered one.
Layer one.
The pursuit of AGI, the grand challenge, generates useful ANI along the way. You aim for the moon, AGI, and end up developing profitable satellite technology, ANI, as a side effect. The research serves the real goal, even if the researchers are aiming higher.
Makes sense. Layer two.
The AGI dream is exciting. It attracts the brightest minds, top scientists, programmers, people who might not be motivated to just, optimize the factory robot's efficiency. In the form of ANI, They chase the AGI vision, but their work builds the AI tools the elites actually need.
Okay, so it funnels talent towards the practical applications. And the third layer.
The media loves AGI and ASI, killer robots, the singularity, philosophical debates. It's dramatic, it gets clicks. While everyone's distracted by the sci-fi scenarios, the real changes, jobs disappearing quietly to ANI, subtle algorithmic control happen unnoticed in the background.
He also mentioned a contingency plan aspect to the ASI fear-mongering.
Yeah, this is pretty insidious. If, somehow, AGI research does get unexpectedly close to creating actual general intelligence, something the elites supposedly don't want, but the public and the scientific community have already been primed for years to see it as an existential threat.
So they could justify shutting it down.
Exactly. A global shutdown of AGI research framed as saving humanity from the ASI apocalypse that everyone's already been hearing about. It prepares the ground for pulling the plug if needed.
So that explains what he calls the strange two-faced nature of AI discussions. Huge hype and funding for AGI, but also constant warnings about how dangerous it is.
Precisely. Draw on the talent with the AGI dream, prepare the public for intervention with the ASI nightmare, and meanwhile, let ANI quietly take over, function by function. That's the real threat nobody's focused on, in his view.
But hang on. Is he really suggesting this is all some perfectly orchestrated, centrally controlled plot directing global research and media narratives? That seems difficult to pull off, right?
He actually addresses that skepticism directly. He says, no, he doesn't think it's like some Illuminati council pulling every string. He points to things like Snowden, WikiLeaks evidence that even powerful groups can't keep total control or secrecy in the internet age.
Okay, so if it's not direct top-down control, how does this smokescreen work so effectively, according to him?
It works because it taps into basic human psychology and the dynamics of the media market. Media outlets, news sites, blogs, social media are fundamentally driven by attention. What do people click on? What do they share?
And people are inherently curious about the powerful, the rich.
Always have been. Kings, celebrities, secret elites. We're fascinated by what goes on up there. The media just reflects and amplifies that interest.
So it doesn't require a conspiracy memo, just a little push.
A nudge, as he puts it. Someone like Bill Gates mentions Bostrom's superintelligence. That gets picked up. Combine that with our built-in fascination with apocalypse stories, end-of-the-world prophecies.
And suddenly a dense academic book becomes a bestseller, and the ASI threat narrative goes mainstream.
Exactly. It feeds another deep psychological need, too. The desire to feel special.
How so?
We want to believe our time is unique, that we're living through something unprecedented, world-changing. This changes everything. It makes us feel significant, combats that fear of just being another blip in history. Shakarian argues this makes us susceptible to grand, traumatic narratives, whether it's AI or climate change or political upheaval. Apocalyptic thinking taps into this very effectively.
So the result is this layered understanding or misunderstanding of AI across society.
Yeah, he breaks it down into rough levels. Most people are at the lowest level. AI is just a sci-fi buzzword from movies. They worry about Terminators, not subtle job displacement. Their contingency plan is based on Hollywood plots.
Then the next level up.
The nerd sphere, he calls it. Techies, pundits, journalists. They know enough to see big changes are happening, which could make them inconvenient for any quiet agenda. But, he claims, they're also vulnerable. They like feeling they're in on the next big thing, they get caught up in the hype pro or con, and they often accept the goal of creating digital humans as just, interesting, or inevitable.
And the top level, the people actually building it.
The developers, the engineers, his source describes them as mostly just workers, focused on solving technical problems, making things efficient. They might think about AGI sometimes, but their day job is building specific ANI tools.
And that focus on efficiency is key.
Absolutely critical, in Shakarian's view. Because from an engineering perspective, humans are often the inefficient part of any system. We make mistakes, get tired, need breaks, form unions, have demands.
So removing the human element just looks like optimization.
Logical progression. Making the system cleaner, faster, more reliable, cheaper. Layoffs due to automation aren't framed as sinister. They're restructuring for efficiency.
But Shakarian wants us to ask, efficiency for whom? Where does this purely logical path lead in the end?
Right. Forget the secret meeting for a second, he suggests. Just follow the logic of efficiency and ask the age-old question, cui bono? Who benefits?
And that question, who benefits, leads directly into stage 2 of his argument, takeover.
Yeah. He argues that technological progress isn't some neutral force unfolding naturally. It's always guided by interests, by where the money flows.
And for a while, those interests may be aligned with broader human benefit, longer lives, more comforts, etc. But will that continue?
Shakarian's answer is a hard no. He argues the money, the investment, the push for AI and automation will continue only until the elites achieve their goal: total independence from human labor for their own safety and convenience.
Things like internet freedom, social mobility, he sees those as temporary. Useful tools for now.
Useful, only as long as they fuel the innovation the elites need. Attracting talent, letting smart people climb the ladder, like in Silicon Valley, to build the tools. But once the tools are built,
The ladder gets pulled up, the rest of us are disposable.
that's the chilling conclusion he draws from the alleged elite perspective. He explicitly attacks what he calls the comforting myth that they still need us, our labor, our consumption, to maintain their wealth.
How does he argue against that? Isn't capitalism built on workers and consumers?
He argues modern elite wealth isn't really tied to that anymore. It's increasingly generated in the abstract world of finance derivatives, high-frequency trading, complex bets. Virtual money multiplying itself, largely disconnected from whether factories are running or people are buying stuff.
And the need for workers is being eliminated by
AI. Automated businesses, automated logistics, robotic manufacturing, automated agriculture. It's all becoming technologically feasible.
Does he give a timeline?
His expert contact estimated maybe just 1 or 2 decades for most non-creative jobs in developed countries to be potentially automatable. And even creative fields aren't safe anymore, with generative AI improving so fast.
The end result being complete obsolescence of human labor on a mass scale.
That's the trajectory he outlines. The people who own the machines, the AI, the robots already own most of the wealth. Soon they'll own the means of producing pretty much everything. Capitalism, as we know it, needing mass employment and consumption, simply ceases to function. It becomes obsolete itself.
And he suggests politicians are starting to see this coming and preparing for it, but maybe in the wrong way.
Or perhaps in exactly the way the elites want them to prepare. This leads him to the idea of the basic income trap.
Universal Basic Income, UBI. It's gone from a fringe idea to serious policy discussions, even trials in some countries, right? Finland, Switzerland.
Exactly. It's become quite mainstream. Shakarian asks, why now? What changed?
His answer ties back to the elite view.
Yeah. From their alleged perspective, capitalism was great while they needed it in me. It drove innovation, productivity, consumption. But if automation makes human labor and mass consumption irrelevant to their wealth and comfort, well, capitalism has served its purpose. It's disposable.
So what's the controversial part? What's the trap in basic income?
Here's Shakarian's really provocative take. He argues the real underlying function of the push for UBI, regardless of the good intentions of many proponents, is to manage the transition to mass uselessness.
To get people accustomed to the idea that they don't need to contribute, that society doesn't need their work.
Precisely. To get us used to being paid for simply existing, detached from any economic contribution.
But for many people, that sounds amazing. Getting paid without working, ending pointless bullshit jobs that so many people feel trapped in.
It looks like a perfect solution, a godsend. Freedom from toil. That's the lure, that's the trap. Because, he argues, very few people are stopping to ask what it fundamentally means about our place in this future society, or where it leads. It circles right back to that unasked question from the secret meeting.
How long will they keep paying us just to exist once we're no longer needed for anything?
Exactly. Which brings us inevitably to Shakarian stage 3, elimination.
Elimination. Okay, that word alone is stark. How does he argue that could possibly happen? We're not talking death squads, presumably.
No, not necessarily active, violent elimination. He points to Japan as a kind of grim preview, what he calls late-stage capitalism playing in fast forward.
Acknowledging cultural specifics, but looking for universal symptoms.
Right. He focuses on trends he sees potentially playing out globally, just maybe slower. He describes Japan as a society dying at full speed.
How so, demographically?
Critically low birth rates, for one. He claims many young women are just opting out, feeling the culture and economy aren't supportive of families. He links this to intense social atomization.
People becoming more isolated, less community.
Yeah. Isolated individuals, he notes, are great for consumer capitalism, less solidarity, more likely to buy things to fill the void. But it also weakens social bonds, community support, maybe even the will to form families. Divide and conquer, in his terms.
And their results are visible.
Undeniably. An aging population, shrinking workforce, more adult diapers sold than baby diapers. He also mentions the government pushing universities away from humanities towards STEM fields.
The very fields building the automation, making humans irrelevant, in his view.
Exactly. And then there's the phenomenon unique to Japan, but maybe symptomatic. The hikikomori.
The extreme social recluses.
Yeah, literally pulling inward.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands, maybe over 1 million if you count those on the verge, mostly young men who completely withdraw, lock themselves in their rooms for years, decades sometimes.
Surviving how?
Parents support them. Their only connection is often the internet games, online forums.
And he sees this not just as individual pathology, but a societal symptom.
He argues it's endemic, reflecting a deeper societal malaise. And now the first generation of hikikomori are aging, their parents are dying. What happens then?
So this extreme withdrawal, combined with low birth rates, plus other trends like freeder culture, or MGTOW, it points towards a kind of voluntary self-eradication.
That's the disturbing picture he paints for Japan, suggesting it requires no overt push. The society is just winding down. And while Japan is maybe an extreme case,
He thinks these trends withdrawal low birth rates are appearing elsewhere too.
declining birth rates are a global phenomenon in developed nations, certainly. And hikikomori-like withdrawal is being reported in other countries too. He argues there's a powerful mechanism helping to drive this, tapping into our fundamental psychology.
Which is...
He introduces the concept of the superstimulus.
Okay, what's a superstimulus? Sounds like something from marketing.
It comes from evolutionary psychology. Basically, our core drives for food, sex, safety, connection evolved in our ancestral environment. Traits that helped us survive and reproduce back then got hardwired.
But our environment today is totally different.
Massively different. Our brains haven't caught up. Think about cravings for fat and sugar. Super useful when calories were scarce. Disastrous now with fast food everywhere. He calls things like burgers and ice cream super stimuli. For ancient food cravings, they hit those pleasure centers way harder than anything evolution prepared us for.
Okay, I get the food example. How does this relate to elimination?
He focuses on the strongest biological drive we have, the sex drive. Hardwired for reproduction, the ultimate evolutionary payoff.
Technology already messed with that, right? Contraception decoupled pleasure from consequence.
That was step one, he says. But now we're creating far more powerful superstimuli for that drive, things that could potentially replace the real thing entirely.
Like, we're not just talking internet porn.
He sees current HD internet porn as close, noting correlations with declining real-world dating and birth rates, and increasingly sophisticated sex toys becoming mainstream. But the real game changer, he argues.
Virtual reality.
Yes, VR. It's been slow coming, but he argues the tech is finally getting there. Immersive visuals, spatial audio, comfortable headsets. The era of virtual reality is arriving.
And the biggest driver for VR development.
Pornography, by far. He cites insiders describing VR porn experiences as, well, beyond anything real, unprecedented, much more addictive, even so much better than real sex.
Why? What makes it so powerful?
Interactivity combined with machine learning. The AI programs running these VR experiences learn you. They track your gaze, your reactions, maybe even biometrics eventually, tailoring the experience in real time to maximize your specific pleasure triggers.
Learning you better than a human partner could.
That's the claim, providing a perfectly customized, always available, consequence-free, endlessly novel experience that no human being could ever consistently match.
And like phones or drugs, if the demand is strong enough, it'll become cheap and accessible. VR parlors, maybe?
That's the projection, potentially making human interaction, relationships, even the drive to reproduce seem less appealing, more difficult, less rewarding than the perfectly engineered virtual alternative.
So VR sex becomes the ultimate superstimulus, hijacking our strongest drive, potentially derailing reproduction and pair bonding for a perfectly tailored, isolated pleasure.
That's his chilling conclusion, a powerful tool for pacification and perhaps voluntary decline.
Okay, so bringing this all together, Shakarian started out skeptical of the conspiracy, but now...
He admits he was probably wrong to think it couldn't be pulled off. He doesn't necessarily believe it's all one grand, orchestrated plot down to the last detail.
But the trends are converging.
Yeah, the technological possibilities, the economic shifts, the psychological vulnerabilities, they're all aligning in a way that's incredibly conducive to that alleged elite goal.
Yeah.
And he suggests some elites are likely noticing these trends and actively, maybe discreetly, pushing them along. exploiting them.
So the endgame scenario he lays out, and it's a synthesis of all this.
Exactly. It goes like this. Step 1, automation via AI becomes sufficient for the elite's needs. Step 2, any dangerous AGI research gets shut down globally using the ASI fear narrative.
Step 3, the old economy dismantled. Basic income becomes the norm, managing the useless masses. Step 4, education system further gutted, deemed unnecessary.
Step 5, the job market collapses. But widespread, super addictive VR entertainment, sex, simulated social life, games, keeps everyone occupied, pacified. Birth rates plummet.
Leading to
The expected outcome. Most people just fade away. Live out contented, maybe even happy, but totally irrelevant lives plugged into VR, dying childless. Atomization complete. Maybe a small remnant is kept, maybe not.
And no revolution, no fight back.
How could there be? Basic needs met by UBI, deepest desires seemingly met by VR superstimuli. Any dissent could be channeled into a video game revolution. The game, he suggests bleakly. And if all else fails,
Last resort.
nuclear bombs, he mentions almost as an afterthought. If the passive approach isn't enough.
It's an incredibly dark picture. Does he offer any way out? Any hope at all?
The book ends with an epilogue called Alternatives. He first clarifies he used a pseudonym not out of fear, but due to company affiliations at the time. He admits researching all this filled him with genuine dread, a feeling of an inevitable slide into dystopia.
But there's a glimmer.
He finds it in a weirdly mundane story. An elderly woman in Albania, Arthur Shakarian, scavenging for copper, accidentally cut a major fiber optic cable. It knocked out internet connectivity for the entire country of Georgia for 2 days.
Okay. What's the significance of that?
He stresses he's not a Luddite. He values technology's benefits, freedom, health, lifespan. He doesn't think we can or should go back.
He doesn't want to smash machines or go back to farming. He knows tech has brought huge benefits. Freedom, health, lifespan.
So it's not about stopping progress. It's about
Disruption. Einstein's accidental act showed him.
that the system is vulnerable. Even this seemingly unstoppable, ubiquitous flow of information and control relies on physical infrastructure. It can be disrupted. It's not inevitable. Progress isn't a magical force. It runs on cables that can be cut.
So disruption is possible. What's his proposed strategy then? How do we avoid this future?
It's twofold, focusing on disrupting the perceived inevitability and the power structures.
First,
Put the decision makers in the spotlight. Constantly question their motives, their reasoning behind pushing certain tech or policies. Demand transparency. Highlight the alternatives they're ignoring. Shine a light on the process.
and second,
Tackle wealth inequality at its root. But not by just accepting basic income, which he sees as alms for the obsolete. Instead, demand a radical redistribution of ownership of the means of production.
ownership of the machines, the
Yeah.
AI, the robot.
Exactly. That's where the future wealth is. If the masses don't own a significant share of the machines that will do the work and create the value, they will ultimately own nothing and depend entirely on the owner's goodwill, which, his book argues, might not last.
A fundamental shift in who controls the automated future.
That's the core of his alternative path.
So, to sum up this deep dive, Arthur Shakarian presents this chilling narrative based on an alleged insider account in his own research. He argues that a confluence of tech trends, especially AI, economic shifts, and psychological manipulation, possibly nudged along by elites, points toward a future of mass obsolescence, pacification through UBI and VR, and potential passive elimination.
And his proposed way out isn't smashing the machines, but disrupting the narrative of inevitability, demanding accountability from leaders, and crucially, fighting for collective ownership of the automated systems that will define future wealth and power.
It's definitely a lot to chew on. What do you, listening right now, make of this perspective? Does this idea of powerful converging trends feeling almost inevitable, potentially exploiting our basic human drives, does that resonate at all with what you see happening?
What questions does this raise for you about where we're heading with work, technology, society itself?
And maybe the final thought to leave you with, drawing from the core of Shakarian's argument. If our deepest biological drives, our desires for pleasure, connection, even purpose, can be perfectly engineered and satisfied by machines, what's left that defines us as human? What motivation remains to build a shared future together in the real world? It really boils down to ownership versus dependency.
Absolutely. And it leaves you thinking, what's the real difference between a future where you're just given enough to survive, pacified maybe, and a future where you actually have a stake, own a piece of the technology, creating all the wealth? And as you look around at the tech and social changes happening so fast, whose interests, really, are being served by the direction we're heading.
Definitely something to mull over.
For sure.
Yeah.
Something to consider as you go about your day. We'll leave it there for this deep dive.